It's the 8th day of the month, and there's an AppSec journey in the number 8, like the rise of personal computing with the 8-bit Commodore 64. Modern HTML requires character encoding with UTF-8. Chrome's JavaScript engine is called V8. Number 8 on the OWASP Top 10 is about software and data integrity failures. And an 8 on its side looks like infinity, which is about how long it'll take for AppSec to get that top 10 down to 0. Which means this week we talk with Dan McKinney from Cloudsmith about SBOMs and how AppSec and DevOps teams need to share responsibility in the supply chain to make them effective. In the news segment, Excel gains JavaScript, the Linux kernel gains an RCE, NPM gains more malware, NIST gains some software labels, and more. Load star, 8 and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. It's the show to learn the latest tools, techniques, and processes necessary to understand DevOps, application security, and cloud security. Your trusted source for the latest application security news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Contrast Security enables organizations to secure their applications from development to production. By embedding security sensors within software, Contrast automatically and continuously detects vulnerabilities in both custom and open source code while developers write code, providing them with context-specific how-to-fix guidance for easy and fast remediation. At the same time, by identifying only true vulnerabilities that pose risk and eliminating those that do not, Contrast empowers developers and security teams to prioritize and focus on only those vulnerabilities that matter. Learn how Contrast can help you secure your applications from development through production at securityweekly.com/contrast. We discuss application security a lot on this show, and we know that the implications for code security have become even greater as cloud adoption accelerates software development. Shift Left bridges the gap between security teams and developers to find and fix vulnerabilities accurately from the source. Shift Left Core is an innovation in code security with industry-leading accuracy and speed. It combines next-generation static code analysis, intelligent software composition analysis, secrets detection, security insights, and contextual developer security education in one easy-to-use platform. Learn more and create your free account at securityweekly.com/shiftleft.
This is episode 173, recorded November 8th, 2021. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, Mr. Kinsella. How are you doing today?
You know, there's not too many people who can get me looking at the Commodore DOS wiki page on a Monday morning, so thanks for that.
Start your peaks, start your pokes, and we'll check back with you to see what you've done in a little bit, because we have to get through some announcements, such as an announcement to join us for our next live webcast on November 4th to learn about pragmatic steps to reduce your software supply chain risk. Then join us November 11th to learn the key insights and takeaways from the new 2021 OWASP Top 10. Visit securityweekly.com/webcasts to save your seat. And do not forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. With over 10 years in the world of engineering, Dan currently leads developer relations at Cloudsmith. Bridging the gap between customer success, engineering, and marketing, Dan is incredibly passionate about helping people and organizations implement and adopt technologies that secure their software supply chain. In addition to developer relations, Dan is also the voice and creator behind Cloudsmith's YouTube tutorials, guides, and the key writer behind all blogs and documentation. Fun fact, Dan is also a professional DJ with over 2,000 gigs under his belt alongside some of the biggest names in the industry. Hello, Dan. Thank you for joining us as two very small names in the industry.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I should say that I do have a Commodore Amiga above my shoulder there. It's not a Commodore 64, but it's very related.
It's very related, and we love the vintage computing that's behind you for all of our YouTube listeners and watchers can check out. But part of the thing we also want to have you here is to also tell us a little bit about SBOM. Now, I'm going to riff a little bit on your DJ background, and I'm going to guess that SBOM is sort of the track listing for software albums. So that's a little bit about what it is, perhaps. But maybe we should start talking about either why it is, why do we need an SBOM, or what are the what's the state of security or state of threats out there that mean we're we need to be talking about supply chain once again.
Sure, absolutely. And that is if I can say, that's a fantastic analogy to a track listing. It really is. I mean, look, the idea of an SBOM in itself, it isn't really a new idea, right? I mean, if we look back to, I think it was 2014, there was the Cyber Supply Chain Security and Management and Transparency Act. It was a piece of legislation in the US. Now, it didn't pass then, but it did raise awareness. It brought it to the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And then, of course, this year, President Biden issued an executive order, on improving the nation's cybersecurity. And that tasked the National Institute of Standards and Technology with issuing guidance to include standards and procedures or criteria regarding several topics in order to enhance the security of the software supply chain, including, providing a purchaser with a software bill of materials for each product. And why is that important now? Well, it's been important for a while, but I think what's really brought it to the fore now is the massive increase in supply chain attacks that we've seen. And people need to know what their software contains and what they are consuming to produce software. That's more important now than it ever was.
So, and clearly we can point to a lot of problems that have come out this year, but I think, the supply chain security perhaps isn't necessarily new. And you pointed out some of a little bit, you touched on a little bit of the history that we've either been here before, we've tried this before. So there's a little bit of history to trying just to say, trying to address what the problem here is within supply chains, meaning what are all the components that have gone into a blob of software, and do they have known vulnerabilities, or can I just keep them on the shelf so that I can go back and flip through when a new vulnerability comes out and say I'm exposed or not? So a little bit, what have you seen recently that you think can give us some optimism about the future of SBOMs and supply chain, that this can be an effective and successful turning point now for security?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mean, some history, and there is some history here, right? So we do have some open standards for SBOM. So you have the Software Package Data Exchange, SPDX, and it's backed by the Linux Foundation. Mm-hmm. And you also have the Cyclone DX specification that's managed by the Cyclone DX, the core working group. And that has its origins in the Open Web Application Security Project, the OWASP project. And that's not particularly new. And really, there's sort of two sides to this. So there's the side of the software developer, the person who is producing software. They need to be aware of what's coming in. Like you said, whether they can keep it on the shelf, and if a new vulnerability comes along, they can check it. And then there's the side of the consumer. And really, what we've heard about of late this year in particular is a lot about the side of the software consumer. So going right back to SolarWinds and the supply chain breach and things like CodeCov, and earlier in the year, the demonstration of dependency confusion attacks, sort of package impersonation attacks. That's really showing you the impact from the consumer side. But it's very important as a developer, as an engineering team, or as a software development company, to be able to have that record, that chain of what is there, what your software contains. And it's only getting more complex as well. Software projects are not getting less complex, and the visibility is not naturally getting better by itself. It's not clearing up. So the idea of a standard for an SBOM that goes across all is something that, I mean, it's so necessary now. It's more necessary than ever. It really is.
It is. And I'm glad you mentioned CodeCov, because I thoroughly agree that it's absolutely necessary that we need something like this. But we also, we can't just create an SBOM and then walk away. Our work is not done, especially because of CodeCov. I can't remember the exact timing of it, but, CodeCov wasn't the vulnerability, the backdoor wasn't discovered, I believe, within a matter of minutes or hours. I think it was a few days.
No,
which
that's right.
If we think about SBOMs, it comes with some signatures, some things you're supposed to be checking. So, are there? I'm not trying to blame the victim here, but are we a bit missing the boat? I'm running out of metaphors. Should we have been reading the liner notes and paying attention to what this was saying and say maybe this CodeCov release didn't have, maybe there was something wrong with it?
Well, it's funny that you should say that, because you're right. It wasn't discovered that quickly. And how was it discovered? Well, it was actually discovered by a user. It did get out the door, and it was discovered by a user who happened to check the checksums, right? And who thought, this doesn't look right. And in many ways, by that stage, it's too late, right? It's already got out the door. And it's sort of down to good fortune that there was security conscious users like that decided to do those checks and to own that process. So that is sort of indicative of where we're at right now. It does happen, and they do get out the door. And it's not because it's impossible to stop. It's a lack of process and a lack of a defined process and defined standards. And that's what's really missing here. The intent is good. People know, but it's putting that into action that is a difficulty at the moment.
I'm curious too about the aspect of standards, but then we also need to implement automation. We have to have tooling to support these standards, especially if we're talking, we're going to use the term at scale. Automation has to be part of it. And something even as simple as checking signatures could be done manually off the command line. But, GPG itself, if these are all GPG signed, historically has been awful from a user experience perspective. And I know recently, Google, I think in the work it's been doing in this area has been pushing on things like SigStore. Do you see the usability aspects of this, or the tooling also improving, or what are some things that you would basically want to see, I guess, around the tooling that's supporting these standards?
Absolutely, the tooling has to improve, and in a way, that's the whole point of SigStore. Right. I mean, SigStore is related to the SALSA framework as well, which we'll talk about in a moment because it is related. But when you think of SigStore, well, what is SigStore? It's a method for signing artifacts and packages and software. Is that new in itself? No, it's not. Right. The idea of signing software and packages is not new in itself. But you're absolutely right. The process can be difficult for non-security people. And the developer experience, the user experience, it really can leave a lot to be desired. So the idea of something like SigStore, and there have been previous digital signing solutions, and they're good at what they do and their priority. But, is, how do I put this? The issue is, when it comes to signing packages, who holds the key? Who holds the private key, right? And especially for open source projects, is that some of the project maintainers, or is it maybe a sponsor, or is it a foundation? And managing that over time is a challenge, right? That's part of the developer experience and the user experience. So the aim of SigStore, the priority of it really is to make software signing easy, right? The way that Let's Encrypt did with TLS certificates for HTTPS, right? And they used to be expensive and a bit cumbersome, but not anymore. So this need for a free and open sort of digital code signing, it's only going to grow, right? And as we've said many times, you've said it yourself, that sort of now every company is a software company. And really the bottom line is that SigStore aims to make artifact signing so simple that it can be done by default and transparently. And it's ubiquitous across all registries and artifact storage, and that plays directly into the Google SALSA framework as well.
Yeah, I think I love how you brought in the Let's Encrypt aspect there too, because rather than just telling people go use HTTPS or go create an SBOM, Salsa and SigStore is saying, here's how we're going to help you do it. Because, on the Let's Encrypt side, certs were expensive. That was a budget consideration. So suddenly we have a security tax, if you will, because you'd have to spend money to get security, even though we all want it. We all think it should be there. So that's a great point. And I also want to bring into part of this conversation, too, as we talk about kind of riffing on the HTTPS and just the security of this, is also making sure that we're clear about what something like SigStore, signing packages, and even just SBOMs in general are doing. Because let's just touch a bit on the threat models, because I want to make sure we push back against the misconception or misunderstanding that we have an SBOM, we are now secure, our work is done. That's clearly not right. So what should be some of the ways that we think about these threat models, or what should we be leaning on SBOMs for versus we're going to need other processes and tools for other security domains?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the SBOM is but one piece of the puzzle, right? And it gives you the information that you need, but it's still on you to verify and authenticate that information. And some of the Salsa framework deals with that. So, at a very sort of high level, Salsa framework, it's an end-to-end framework for ensuring the integrity of software artifacts throughout the supply chain. And it has 4 levels. So with Salsa level 4 representing, the ideal and most secure state, but it is intended to be incrementally adoptable. For example, Salsa level 1 just requires that the build process is fully scripted and automated, and that it can generate provenance. So, you need an SBOM in order to do that, right? You need to be able to verify that provenance. And that's the first step. But moving up the levels further, Salsa level 4, the highest level, requires a lot more than that, like 2-person reviews for all changes and complete version control and a lot more on the provenance side as well. So the SBOM alone is not enough, but it's part of a larger framework like that. And I mean, there's other tools there as well that are not eliminated by SigStore, and they're not done away with by SigStore. Things like InToto, right? Now, InToto it's not just for signing artifacts. It produces, attestations about how the software was produced. Essentially, it verifies that each task in a build pipeline was carried out as planned. And therefore, it's providing some sort of assurance that the final product was not tampered with. And they all fit together with an SBOM and something like the Salsa framework to give you that, that total big picture verification that you need.
Yeah, and clearly, don't want to make this entire year only ever about SolarWinds, but that anti-tampering and the integrity checking obviously is pretty important for that scenario that was SolarWinds, because that attack was part of a subtle infiltration of their CI/CD pipeline that mucked about in memory, no less, with some of the build process. So so that's a great point. You can build software that's been tampered with, or you can also build software and have a chain of custody and some attestation that, just as you said, what the plan was executed is how you wanted and expected it to be.
Absolutely.
Curious then to say maybe, looking at how, let's talk a little bit maybe about just how software is being built these days. And here my mind is starting to turn towards, on-prem versus cloud. And does that change behaviors in terms of, or security properties of build systems? Are there, in one or the other of those scenarios, does SBOM, or the idea of just our supply chain or how we're deploying our software, have some important things that we need to remember for maintaining security there?
Yeah, definitely. I think historically, and I'm old enough to remember this as well, but I think historically a lot of people, they get some comfort from on-premise software that it's somehow inherently more secure than, say, a cloud-native product or a SaaS service that you would use. It's not something that I subscribe to now. I think it's very easy to sort of use on-prem installations and software that you're running yourself like that as a sort of a crutch, that you have it behind, a corporate firewall, and that that brings you an extra level. And in some ways it does, but in other ways it doesn't. If you look back to the dependency confusion attacks, which was demonstrated like a sort of academic exercise at the start of the year, like really large companies fell victim to that. I mean, you're talking like Apple and Tesla. And you know, how was data exfiltrated in that demonstration? Well, it was actually exfiltrated over DNS, right? Now, I don't know many people that block DNS at their firewall. I'm sure some do, but that's a real life example there of how, you know, running stuff on-prem behind a corporate firewall, it doesn't necessarily give you the security that you would think. And it's very easy to get complacent there when I think the focus needs to be on secure software development practices. You need to look at the end-to-end process of building the software from start to finish, right through from shift left security and scan at source and static analysis and dynamic analysis, all the way through packaging, which is obviously, you know, a topic that's very close to us at Cloudsmith, right the way through to deployment and delivery. And that's really, it has to be an end-to-end thing. It can't be bits in isolation. And certainly I think now that is much more important than where the software is deployed or how you're running it, the runtime. It's more how was it put together, and what can you verify about that process? What can you independently verify about how that software was built? That to me is a much more important thing in 2021 than anything else at the moment.
I want to take a tiny step back if we can. And so while we've been talking, you've given me an excuse here to do something I've been wanting to do for a while because I don't have an SBOM for my our software yet. So I started going like, okay, if I want to, I mean, we've got some stories we're going to cover in the news here this morning about, you know, there's more node packages that have malicious code installed on them. Shit, am I vulnerable, right? So I went through and I already checked that this morning with good old grep, but for the average person, where I'm going here is we talk a lot about SBOMs and Cyclone DX and all these sort of great, wonderful things in signing. And we've sort of jumped from 0 to like, let's say 75 without, I don't think we're covering, not just this conversation, but I think a lot of these conversations are not covering the basics. I know you got a product which can do this, but beside that, if someone's like looking right now, how do they get this stuff going? So the example, I just picked someone because we're talking on a site. I'm not trying to rip on Cyclone DX, but I went out to Cyclone DX. They've got a Go module or a Go product which will generate that SBOM for you. The last update to that GitHub repo was, let's just say many months ago, to the point where the installation command no longer works. So I literally can't run their tool to see if I've got an SBOM for Go or to build my SBOM. So what should people be doing? If they want to start with open source, and I know they want to eventually go to an amazing tool like what you've had, but if they want to start right now this morning while they're listening to this, how do they get going? How do they build an SBOM?
Well, it's funny you should say that, actually, Sean. I mean, a lot of people, and I'm not saying that this is the way forward, but a lot of people actually started off with the way you described, right? They grepped it, put it all in a spreadsheet and track it manually like that, right? And right, that's better than nothing, but it's obviously not going to scale, right? And it's not amenable to automation, and it certainly won't progress. It won't help you progress up the proposed levels of the SALSA framework. So the tooling in this area is still very much in its infancy, but there are several options out there. There's plugins for some CI platforms that can generate an SBOM for you. There's the Cyclone DX Go, as you said, but obviously needs a little bit of an update. But the tooling is in its infancy here, and progress is being made rapidly. It really is. It's being made extremely rapidly. So this might sound like a bit of a cop-out answer, but it isn't really, other than, you know, sort of watch this space. And I think you need to keep yourself very well appraised of the developments that are happening. I don't think there is a sort of, I don't think we're quite there yet where there is an ideal sort of, this is exactly the one way to get started, and this does everything that you need it to do. I don't really think there is that just yet, but that's the direction that we're moving in. Absolutely, it is the direction we're moving in. It's hard to say exactly which one's going to come out on top at this stage, but that's definitely, I mean, things like SigStore are part of that, you know, and it's not a one, but it's not a one tool fixes all problem at all.
Moment of silence, sorry. But so that means, I mean, okay, so So people can start with grep. People can build this stuff by hand. The specs, last time I looked at them, are relatively easy to understand.
Yeah.
But basically, what we're saying is well, we want folks to do this, and I mean, I think if people are even thinking about how do you build an SBOM right now, hopefully that means this is enough on their radar that they can go, maybe I have a package which isn't what it claims to be, or the signatures aren't right, or at least if they have some awareness of that, that's a good place to start. But still actually getting, I mean, I'm lucky, I'm just dealing with Go and JavaScript. For some folks out there who might have, let's trigger some people. Maybe they have some F# or some COBOL or some, I don't know, some other language, right? So there you go, Erlang, thank you. Some of these we're going to have maybe a little more difficulty in actually trying to put these things together. But that's where we want to go, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't for 1 second pretend that this is going to be, a very easy thing, especially for some projects. I mean, you can easily picture something that's got, hundreds and hundreds of dependencies, and the dependency graph goes many levels deep. I mean, sitting down and putting that together manually is not really a realistic prospect at all. It really isn't, and that in itself is completely error prone, right? It's very likely that you'll make a mistake, right? We're all, the error is human. So, I mean, I think that at the moment, do I have a perfect answer for that? No, I probably don't, other than to say that, like I say, it is a really exciting area of development. It really is. There are, and I think one of my colleagues is experimenting with a plugin for the CI tool BuildKite, and I'm sure all the other CI tools have equivalent sort of SBOM generating plugins at whatever level of detail they may currently be at. But that's really, and like I said, it sounds like an excuse, but it really isn't, other than to say this is a part that I mean, we're building this now. We're building the frameworks and we're building the tooling. I have no doubt in a year from now, it's going to look very different than this. It may look very different than this 6 months from now. And of course, at Cloudsmith, we believe that package repositories obviously are central to this. Of course they are. That's where the artifacts live. But I don't exactly know what it's going to look like when the dust settles at the moment, to be honest.
So I'm going to ask one more question. And again,
sure,
I'll do my standard preface on this. This is not, I'm not trying to, put you guys in a bad light or really do any sort of harm to this at all. I'm asking this from the point of view of, I want our listeners to understand if they are on level 1 of Salsa. There's a lot of folks out there. And the question being, if it's this hard to put an SBOM together, from your experience or from talking to folks out there, how many people are actually able to easily get up to a level 3 or 4 on a Salsa framework?
Really good question. Really good question. And I mean, level 1 is quite easy. No, it is. Level 1 should be attainable for most people. I mean, it really is. You really just have to have an automated build process and generate some provenance, sign your packages, right? Even if that's done with just simple GPG signatures, that gets you to level 1 as it stands today. So that's very achievable, right? It is. 3 or 4, that's a lot more difficult. I mean, I don't know really if anybody is hitting all of the boxes on level 4 right now. I mean, level 4 needs reproducible builds and things, and I'm sure there are some. But I would say it was a tiny minority. I really would. Level 3 again, not quite as high a bar to hit. Like for example, on level 3, you don't have to cover every single dependency, so it's not dependencies complete. It is at level 4, so again, slightly easier to hit that. But there's a lot more involved around the provenance side. Even at level 3, there's a lot more around the provenance side. It has to be automatically generated, like generated by the service and non-falsifiable and things. And of course, that all carries through to level 4. If I was to put a percentage on it, which I would really be hesitant to do, I would say that the vast majority of people could get level 1, or at least should try to get to level 1 as it stands today. And maybe less than 20% at 3 or 4 or above. Maybe less than that even. Maybe less than that if you're looking at level 4 for sure.
Just looking over it now, I mean, level 2 looks within reason.
Yeah.
But I think that this is the reason I'm bringing this up. I'm sort of turning the spotlight around and going, not so much to people, oh my God, I have to get to level 4, but guys, if you're getting to a level 2 or level 3, that's awesome. That's something to be proud of and actually brag to management about. And actually, you're doing something really great and you're helping your company be more secure. So that's sort of the reason I'm looking at it. I don't want people going, oh my God, I'm going to have to drop everything for work and spend the next 2 weeks getting that last little piece or two for level 4. But,
absolutely not.
There's a lot you can do here that's a benefit.
I couldn't agree more. And it was always intended to be an incremental approach. Every step on it brings benefits, right? So going from nothing to level 1 is great. And going from level 1 to level 2, fantastic. It's a target, right? And the higher you can get, the better. But anywhere on that is good. It all brings benefits. And I totally wouldn't hit on anybody at all for not having a level 4 on the SALSA framework. Absolutely not. But it is meant to be, incremental and builds upon what you've already done. So if you've got the level 1, what you've already got there will help you to move to level 2. And that's the whole idea. At least that's my understanding of it anyway, as it currently stands.
That's a great conversation, because one of the things I think that the two of you are definitely drawing out here is the engineering lift required to increase these levels. Because if we look at level 4 and something like reproducible builds, suddenly you actually possibly have to even go and modify how you are building your code, because you have to deal with things like timestamps, relative versus absolute paths, things that need to be static and predictable across wherever and whenever you're building this software, so it can be reproducible, versus the lower level of maturity where it's more of just, I need a manifest. I just need to keep track of everything, all the other dependencies, libraries that went into this, and just make sure that I have a good list of name and version. So you're still going to get benefit out of that, but clearly the impact on getting to level 4 is going to take a little bit more than a 2-week sprint to finish.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. I think it kind of it gets progressively more difficult to go to the next level. But of course, as I said, every step that you take at the start from level 1 to level 2, you build upon that. You do, and like I said earlier, there's no one tool that fits all here and solves all these problems. SigStore has a place in the SALSA framework. Having an SBOM has a place in the SALSA framework. Other tools like InToto and the Update framework, they all have a place in the SALSA framework where they can help to hit those checkboxes and sort of get you over that line as well. So much like a DevOps tool chain for building a piece of software, which I think again is a collection of best-in-class tools. To achieve these higher levels on the SALSA framework, it's a collection of best-in-class tools that you will chain together, to provide this. So there's a bit of an analogy there as well.
Indeed. And I think, as we're kind of closing to the end here, Dan, you were mentioning, collecting best-in-class tools for that DevOps team. And a lot of this sounded like it's very much the responsibility of the DevOps team to be doing the work, because we're talking about tying into the CI/CD pipeline, adding tooling to that, adding automation, because that's what we want to see. Is there something that maybe a sort of that parting message, or that call to action from either the DevOps side of things to do these things, to do 1 or 2 steps to get into step into that SALSA level 1, or for that matter, pulling in the AppSec team? How can they best be positioned to help perhaps along this journey?
Well, I think that's absolutely right, Mike. I actually think that an overarching idea here is that it's not just the responsibility of the DevOps team or the AppSec team or anybody else. And I mentioned it earlier when we first mentioned SigStore. The whole idea there is to make it so easy that it's done by default, like right developers themselves who can do it. They're not relying on an AppSec team or DevOps team to put this in place for them. It has to be a joint ownership. It has to be a joint ownership. It won't work without that, right? If it becomes a walled garden thing that you throw over the fence to another team, that's just not going to work. That's when the cracks get introduced. So, I think it is a joint effort. And I think the tooling that's being developed now is to make that easier to achieve across, teams with different capabilities and different responsibilities. But that needs to be the outcome. It needs to be, across across everyone. We all have a part to play in this, and you can't shirk it off onto somebody else because, DevOps team should deal with that, or the InfoSec team should deal with that. No, it needs to be security needs to come much lower down, and it needs to be easier. It needs to be a lot easier to do.
Indeed. I think it'd be a lot easier to do. That sounds like, this may not be one of the biggest gigs you've ever done, but you're definitely singing the right tune in terms of what teams can do security-wise. So I want to thank you for joining us and sending this message, Dan.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
I want to thank John as well, and want to thank all of you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Cloudsmith, visit securityweekly.com/Cloudsmith. You can also check out another interview we had done with Cloudsmith back in episode 169 from October 11th, 2021. And for those of you who are just listening to us on audio and didn't get a peek at Dan's background and his vintage computers, go check out DevRel Dan on Twitter for perhaps some other media you can see about his background. And with that, I'll just say thank you once again. We're going to take a quick break and return with news of the week.